Thanks, guys.
Good morning and welcome to today's CFDA webinar in partnership with the Mental Health Coalition. I'm Sasha Brown, the Director of Professional Development at the CFDA, and I'm proud to present today's conversation on the business case for mental health. The Mental Health Coalition is a coalition of the most passionate and influential organizations, brands, and individuals who have joined forces to end the stigma surrounding mental health and to change the way people talk about and care for mental illness. I'd really like to thank Kenneth, who is the founder and chairman of MHC, for engaging with the CFDA on this incredibly important topic and for bringing this group together today to discuss and highlight the resources available to businesses who are looking to support the mental health and well-being of their teams. Several weeks ago, Kenneth attended the Clinton Global Initiative and announced that the Mental Health Coalition, in partnership with Meta, is proud to report that its content and resources have meaningfully changed how over 500,000 Americans have self-reported they felt about the importance of their mental health and their willingness to seek mental health support. Specifically, people's opinion about stigma were changed measurably, allowing for the process and resulting impact to be scalable. The digital initiative showed a significant increase in people's understanding of their emotional well-being and the importance of taking care of it. It also increased people's willingness to seek vital resources for emotional well-being. Leading today's conversation is Darcy Gruttadaro, who is a nationally recognized expert on workplace mental health. She recently joined the National Alliance of Mental Health, serving as the Chief Innovation Officer. Darcy previously served as the director of the American Psychiatric Association Foundation Center for Workplace Mental Health. Now, before I hand it over to Darcy, please note that we are hosting a Q&A at the end of the hour, and you may submit questions via the Q&A box, and those can be submitted anonymously, and we welcome all questions for our panelists. And without further ado, I hand it over to Darcy.
Thank you so much, Sasha. It's really great to be here. And I want to start out by introducing our impressive panelists for today to join in this important conversation. Kenneth Cole is Chairman and Chief Creative Officer at Kenneth Cole, and as Sasha mentioned, founder and chairman of the Mental Health Coalition. We also have Pamela Bell, who's the CEO of Prinkshop, co-founder and board member of the Mental Health Coalition. And also Joseph Altuzarra, creative director of Altuzarra and spokesperson and advocate for the Mental Health Coalition. So this is a great lineup of leaders who have made a real commitment to mental health. So I'm so pleased to be joining them in this conversation. And I would also like to thank CFDA and the Mental Health Coalition for hosting this webinar. So Kenneth, we'd like to start with you and ask you to let us know a little bit more about the Mental Health Coalition, how it got started and what it is.
So I guess it's somewhat self-explanatory, and I appreciate the introduction. Thank you, Darcy, and I'm really appreciative of Pamela's been a great partner, and also a fashionista, and very committed to this cause. And has been a partner, pretty much from its onset. And what Joseph has done is extraordinary. And he reached out at the very beginning, asked how he could be helpful, and we're continuing. And he never says no. And we're looking to find ways. And we're looking for more Josephs. The world needs more Josephs. And he's so articulate, and he's so passionate, and he's so compelling. So we're very, very happy to do it. And thank you, Darcy, for using this platform. The fashion industry has always been leaders and an influential voice in important social issues. And we don't think there's anything more important right now. And I do believe that mental health is arguably the oldest and the newest public health crisis that we've ever lived through. And its impact, and this was this way even before COVID, and it became compounded exponentially since. I was very committed to HIV for years and working, and I was chairman of AMFAR for 14 years. And it became well known that 1 in 200 people were living with HIV, which is pandemic levels, but 1 in 4 were living with mental health conditions. And we would say it's 4 in 4. Because if it isn't you, it's somebody you love, somebody in the family, somebody in the community, somebody in the workplace, but everybody today is living with it. But at the same time, 2/3 of those people, apparently, according to all data, do so in the proverbial shadows. There isn't a way for them to express themselves that isn't stigmatizing. There isn't a vocabulary, there isn't a narrative, there isn't a platform, and people just are not comfortable doing that. So our goal was to figure out how to bring it together and help create a vocabulary or narrative, make it more easy, make people more comfortable expressing themselves, learn how to be empathetic, learn how to be vulnerable, and there's so much opportunity that exists in there. So that's kind of the journey we set out upon, is to destigmatize mental health. It's ambitious. This effort with Meta that you referred to was very important, and it shows that in fact you can change behavior, and you can change the way people perceive themselves. And the fashion industry, we are in effect in the perception business, and that's every day. And so we'll talk a little bit about that later. But so I'm so happy to have this opportunity and to partner with CFDA and Pamela and Joseph in this conversation.
Fantastic. And it's great to see the Mental Health Coalition making. I understand, Pamela, you have CFDA to thank for connecting you with Kenneth. So can you share with us how and why you got involved with the Mental Health Coalition?
Sure. Thank you. Thanks everyone for being here. And hi, and thank you, Kenneth, for your support and leadership. It's been a very, very interesting time. I had been a partner with Kate Spade and Friend since 1993. And after she died by suicide, I had wanted to do something just to help the memory of her be more about the way that she lived, instead of, the way that she had passed away. And it was complex, and I just had a lot of feelings around it. My own mental health was a little shaky. And so I went to the CFDA with a project to try to highlight something that was sort of in respect for Katie and others who struggle with, or had been survivors of suicide loss. And Stephen and Lisa were very sweet, and, they were nice about the project and said, we can't really do this, but we would love to introduce you to Kenneth. He's really doing something that sounds similar to what you would like to do. And I guess it was June of 2019, and I emailed him, or I think Lisa introduced us, and we had a call, and then that was it. I was instantly kind of, taken in, and plus he's, kind of cool. So we had a shared vision, and it remains that way today.
Outstanding. So Joseph, I know you participated in the Mental Health Coalition 121 series and have been open about mental health. And as a leader, that is amazing, because what we know is that leaders set the culture and they set the example within organizations. And that's true across industries. And it's really important as we continue to focus on eradicating stigma as a major barrier to people connecting with care. So curious about what advice you have for other leaders within organizations who see and value the importance of mental health and speaking openly about it.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me. I love talking about mental health, and I thank Pamela and Kenneth and you, Darcy, for all of your leadership and support. I came to this very organically and from a very personal place, because I myself, a few years before I reached out to Kenneth and learned about the Mental Health Coalition, was going through sort of my own mental health journey. And I very specifically started having really, and I hope it's okay if I talk about more personal things, but I started having like very debilitating panic attacks. And they really came out of nowhere, and it would happen almost every day. It would happen sort of once or twice a day. And I had never spoken to anyone about my mental health. It had never really been something that I had addressed in my own life. And I didn't really have the tools or know who to talk to. And it got to the point where I was sort of scared to leave my house. I couldn't really work. And I was constantly scared that I was going to have a panic attack, which in turn would sort of lead to panic attacks. And I was having really scary, like almost suicidal thoughts. I mean, it was a very dark time. And I think the worst part of it was that I felt an incredible amount of shame around talking about it, because I felt like I was sort of alone, and that if I talked about it with anyone at my work or in my family, that it would be seen as weakness, and that, you know, I wouldn't be seen as like a strong leader in my company. I ended up finding care fortuitously by going to my primary care physician, who sort of encouraged me to go see, to seek treatment, and it ended up sort of really opening up the conversation in my family about sort of depression and obsessive compulsive disorder, which I didn't know was something that was rampant in my family at all, but also really opened me up to thinking about the ways in which I lead my company, and in which I talk about mental health, because it was really not something that I had ever sort of addressed, or that I had ever thought about within my organization. And I sort of remember having one-on-one sit downs with people, and I'm, still a small enough company that I do that, and really like had very sort of frank conversations about where I was, and how, the sort of state of mind that I found myself in this particular moment, and the sort of pressures that I felt, and really starting conversations with people about how they felt, and having this kind of dialogue with people was really transformative for the culture of the company. And I have to say, the culture of Altuzarra is something that has always been really important to me, like the sort of the way that the company is run, and how we discuss issues, and really giving people a really good balance, a sort of really good work-life balance. But I think it really changed radically when we started thinking more about mental health, and people sort of prioritizing their sort of needs, and understanding sort of their mental health journeys within the context of within the professional context. Because I think, just as I had sort of, gone through my journey and realized how much like the pressure of the industry, and needing to like, always be better than your last collection, and feeling the sort of the responsibility and the weight of like this company on me, and what that sort of did to my mental health. I think that was something that a lot of people that I spoke to within my organization also had to sort of figure out, and also had to to question. And I think that open dialogue was something that was really helpful. And not that I necessarily advocate for, you know, for leaders within a company to like talk to every single person about their mental health, because I have a particular relationship with people, and you know, if they felt comfortable talking to me about it, then it was great. And some people might not, and I think that's also totally okay. But I think for me at least, and I don't know, I'm coming from a very personal place, so what I might be saying might be wrong, and you guys can correct me. But I think just people knowing that the dialogue, the conversation is open and the dialogue is there, is something that I have found has really been transformative.
Yes, I mean, I think you're opening with, I hope it's okay to share my personal connection is really, that is the way we eradicate stigma, is when people realize so many of us experience these conditions, and you can experience a mental health condition at the highest levels of organizations. We know that across industries. So kudos to you for recognizing the importance, and you made it psychologically safe for others to know it's okay to talk about what they're experiencing. I think that's exceptional as a leader. We know that's what makes a difference. So I just wanted to say opening up makes it okay for others too. And that's what it's all about. And we're seeing more of that now, which is amazing to see mental health come out of the shadows and into the light and onto our everyday lives. So, but I did want to mention too, that we know from the data that 18 to 29-year-olds are really experiencing anxiety and depression at higher rates than ever. And also they come to the workplace with an expectation that there'll be an openness about mental health. Mm-hmm. So, and that's changing, which is great, because we want that openness to happen. Mm-hmm. So just curious whether you're seeing that within your work and beyond, and if you have any comments around that.
Definitely. I mean, I think that there is a generational shift around the conversation about mental health. You know, I remember earlier on in my mental health sort of journey, someone on my executive team saying like, oh, don't talk about your mental health with like the people on your team, because they're gonna think that you're like weak, or that you're you know, flawed, and that's not how they should see you. And that, I think that was very much, I think that sort of approach to leadership has sort of gone out the window. I think it's a very different sort of perspective now, one that I find much more sort of refreshing, much more in line as well with how I like to lead. But I certainly see with, you know, all of the younger team members in the company, that there is much more openness and much less shame around the conversation about mental health. There's also sort of an awareness of it that just didn't exist when I was starting out in the industry. Like no one talked about sort of depression or like the pressures that you feel. And maybe I do think the pandemic, while it has exacerbated, you know, some of these issues, and sort of the pressure that one feels, I personally, and again, this was a very personal thing, I felt like during the pandemic, a lot of my peers opened up, and I was able to have conversations with other designers, other creatives, with editors that like pre-pandemic would have never happened. You know, I would have never told another designer like, yeah, I feel really, you know, I feel really scared, or I feel depressed, or you know, I can't seem to like muster up hope, or, you know, all of these things that feel like at one point you needed to really have this facade. I think I think the pandemic to a certain extent allowed me to be more vulnerable, and maybe in return allowed other people to show more of their vulnerability to me.
Yes, I think that is a fantastic point, and it really humanized all of us in the sense of vulnerability and our willingness to be empathetic and compassionate and more understanding. And so it did bring mental health into the conversation in so many places. So Kenneth, I wanted to turn to you to talk about the amazing roadmap that the Mental Health Coalition developed to address mental health in the workplace. And this webinar is about the business case. So it's a great tool because, again, we've normalized mental health in a way now that we haven't seen before. And we know mental health really relates to stress and burnout and workplace social anxiety. And it normalized the fact that we all have mental health. So as a business owner, can you tell us your thoughts about the business case for mental health and how the roadmap kind of plays into that as well?
Yeah, oh, sure, I'd be happy to do that. So, but first, let me first to create context. One of the struggles that I had is try to understand why the needs were so clear and so pervasive, but yet the resources weren't. And upon contemplation, it also becomes clear that the compassionate case for mental health is made all the time, and it's been made forever. And everybody gets it. It's heart-wrenching, but it doesn't resonate, and it doesn't move the needle, and people don't know what to do with it, and resources have not been brought to bear as a result of it. But then I believe if you make the business case, everything changes, and I do think that specifically in the fashion industry, by the way, the fashion industry. Stress, anxiety, depression are kind of embedded in the business model, and we are consistently consuming ourselves with how we're perceived by the world. And am I as good as I was yesterday? And will I be as good as I need to be tomorrow? And can I wear what I wore yesterday? And what if they're wearing it? Can I wear it? Does it fit where it needs to fit? And how are people going to conceive it? And how are people going to conceive it? And how will I appear? We did these ads years ago. One was, and then everything's exacerbated again by social media, because now everything you do, we all live in a fishbowl. So, and everybody's kind of in theory sitting in judgment of us, or we certainly think they are. And we did an ad campaign years ago which said everybody's life is better than mine. And then we did a runway show which said with at the end the message is it for real or is it for show? But these are this is how we are digesting and processing our experiences every day in the industry in and of itself. But in a bigger picture anyway, so statistics and data that was kind of put out into the world, 80% of those with depression, 80% of those of 80% of people who are and that people with depression, that workplace issues, 80% of those individuals have struggled with certain levels of depression and a level of functional impairment. 27% have serious difficulties with their work and self-declared and home life. Global loss of $1 trillion in productivity, not including medical costs. $200 million in work days, 200 million work days lost a year at a cost of $44 billion. So that's quantifiable. So then, so that is the problem. And the solution, I make the argument, is not, first of all, it's not an expense, but it's in fact investment that pays itself back between $4 and $10 for every dollar from the business. So it is unequivocally and believed and known, in fact, that it increases an investment in mental health for the organization population, increases retention, recruitment, and productivity unequivocally. So, And it's so compelling, and it's very hard not to address it as such. And specifically, there were several studies that were done. One study, workers who felt supported with their mental health within a workplace were 20% less likely to report experiencing symptoms of mental health than even in the first place, which is pretty interesting. And that's kind of cause and effect. And that was a Harvard Business Review study. And then in another study, workers who felt supported with their mental health within a workplace reported higher job satisfaction, retention to stay in their current company. And in one study, workplace retention, mental health policies were shown to increase at work productivity by 44%. We have, and Pamela will take you through this, we have several of our partners, by the way. The Mental Health Coalition consists of 36 of the largest and most influential and diverse not-for-profit mental health service providers in the country. So, and it's a very impressive group of collection of resources that we put together, that we present on our website, and that are available. And in fact, Meta, Instagram uses our platform and to aggregate and guide people for their platform for well-being. So, and so we have certain of our partners who have programs that are available to people to support you, ways you can call, ways you can guide and direct to the degree that it's helpful.
Yes, I certainly, if you're experiencing a mental health condition, I know the concerns, you mentioned productivity, and the concerns are not just people being absent, but presenteeism too. People coming to work, they're not engaged, they're distracted by the reality that they're experiencing a mental health condition that is impacting how they process, how they think, how creative they are, especially in the fashion industry. I mean, it makes sense that there would be real concerns around making sure people can be open and seek care when they need it, because it's absolutely going to impact productivity and performance. I think that's just common sense. And so there's a lot of opportunity there. And it's great that the Mental Health Coalition has brought together this real who's who of mental health leading organizations and beyond. So I'm wondering about resources you all are aware of that are through the Mental Health Coalition and those that are beyond the Mental Health Coalition, if you want to share some of those, and so that those on the webinar can really get a sense of kind of who can we reach out to, where can we find the information, and more.
Okay, is that my question? I'm just.
Yes, it is.
I just wanted to say thank you, Joseph. That was really, it's really brave. And I think that the best resource in any company is the leader. And so having open conversations with your team is, I think, probably, the most valuable resource that you can have. And, it's like a silly little thing. If you can't name it, you can't tame it. I don't even know if that's really appropriate, but, it's talking about mental health, I'm sure, just makes everyone feel so much better. We've noticed that also from our one-to-ones where, young people would see these athletes that are revered and young designers hearing you talk about your mental health. I think that they've said it really helps the individual to hear like-minded stories. They're like, oh, wow, I had panic attacks too. I never told anyone, and just makes you feel better. But in the absence of a leader, like Kenneth and Joseph, there's so many programs. I mean, we went through, and we're going to be emailing this list, but I just wanted to mention a couple of them. There's something called Mental Health First Aid, which is exactly what it sounds like. And we'll send the link, but it's put on by the National Council for Mental Wellbeing. It's a course you take over several hours, and you really learn how to talk to your coworkers about mental health or friends. It's incredibly valuable. And it's not, I could say for me, at least, it was not all intuitive. I definitely have said things that have been, within my own family and friends that were the opposite of what they said to say on the mental health first aid. So It's a very good tool to have. And we did it with a very small group. And I urge anyone who's interested or works for a company to bring it to the management and the company's attention. It's a great team building exercise also. It's interactive. I think you can do it in person or Zoom. Then there's the NAMI, which Darcy, obviously you're all too familiar with. And it's one of the first things that I think Kenneth Cole Corporation was one of the first to sign up for this, which is the Stigma-Free Workplace. And they provide you with tools on how to remove stigma. I mean, so many things are so simple just in the language. I think that, a lot of people use the language like, oh, he's crazy or something like that. And they say, you're not supposed to say that. Or even saying like self-stigmatizing, I'm crazy, it can be harmful. So there's language, there's interactions, there's, how to have boundaries, but also get close. And I think that the Stigma-Free Workplace, and then you have I guess you get like a certificate for being a stigma-free workplace. And then it's, something that you have to live up to, which I think is it's empowering in the company, and that in itself, in addition to, maybe mental health days off and having an open door for issues with your mental health, having certain guidelines, I think is very important, especially the larger the company, right? So I guess those are, there's just so many. There's the well-being trust, there's One Mind at Work. We will send these, the list. I don't want to take up too much time, but there are lots of resources.
Yeah, that's great. And Kenneth, I didn't know if you wanted to say anything else about the resources before we move on.
You can go on the website and you can on Mental Health Coalition, you can see it all there too. There is a roadmap for workplace mental health, and you'll see it, and it'll kind of very simplistically take you through the various resources. But
also,
yeah.
the Instagram has some very great posts and small guides that you can, screenshot. I have a few that I've screenshot and printed out and have to remind myself sometimes.
I just love it. I love that Joseph was comfortable being vulnerable and putting himself out there. That's hard. It's very hard to do it. And I didn't really have the courage to do it. We did during COVID, we launched a campaign. Actually, my daughter kind of spearheaded it. It was asking the single most asked question everywhere in the world, in every language, every day of the week, and the one most rarely ever answered, which is, how are you really? And we launched it with Kendall Jenner, and we did, it was a challenge, and she brought in members of her family. We had massive engagement in a very short period of time. And then we did another initiative with Oprah and her production team, which is the one-to-one series on these lives. And all that content still exists on our Instagram page. And Joseph was a part of that. Where people had open, honest, vulnerable conversations with each other. And we had a mental health person who contextualized it, normalized it, and made it easier to process. And just learning how to be comfortable talking about your struggles. We worked with some people, with Saks, for example, and Joseph did a trunk show, and he showed his newest collection, and then a certain percentage of proceeds went in support of Saks' open to buy plan, and another percentage went towards the Mental Health Coalition. But there are ways that you can bring this and make it part of the culture of the business. And we would so love to be able to help and support people, others, if they're so inclined and desirous of such. But the resources are there, and they work, and they change, and they make things better for the individual, and also and enable them to be able to show up at work and feel better about what they do, and everybody wins.
Yeah, and I think the really great thing about the roadmap is that sometimes organizations just don't know where to start. And it really is a matter of looking at your culture and deciding what works best for your organization. But the roadmap gives you choices, and it gives you a sense of how to begin the process. And The other thing, as Pamela mentioned about training, is when you bring in training like mental health first aid and others, you really show your organizational commitment to mental health. So that in and of itself makes a statement, along with the fact that it helps people have the tools to start a conversation and to know how to do it in a way that doesn't put anyone on the defense, because that can be really challenging and people can still get a little uncomfortable around mental health. There's a lot of, as Joseph mentioned, the person who said, oh, don't tell the team, you don't want to be perceived as weak. There are those myths and stereotypes that still exist. Mm-hmm. So having the tools and having the extra support is really important. So, I mean, Joseph, obviously you had that advice and yet, went ahead and shared your personal story and personal connection, which is really what it's all about. So I don't know if you want to speak to sort of what it felt like to have that vulnerability and the outcome, and how other organizations, smaller and larger, really can understand how to get this started.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for me, it was really, it was really a personal journey. I mean, I didn't intend to sort of start this as like a culture transforming sort of event for my company. I was going through this really, really difficult time, and I felt a lot of shame around it. I didn't know how to talk about it, but I mean, honestly, truthfully, the way that it happened was that we were in a meeting and I started having a panic attack, and I didn't know, it was very obvious something was happening, and I didn't know how to talk about it or how to address it. And I was with someone, and I just sort of like blurted it out. I sort of said, like, I'm having a really, really hard time, and this is what's going on in my life, and I just had this panic attack, and it's really debilitating, and I had missed a couple days of work, and everyone could tell I was really on edge, and I had like canceled a couple of events. And she was the first person that I talked to about it, and she said, oh, I have panic attacks too. How do yours feel? And I sort of described them, and she said, yeah, I have the same thing. I have like this feeling like world is like sort of caving in, and like everything gets really dark, and I can't like breathe anymore. And it was like the most incredible moment of suddenly feeling like you're not alone anymore. And because I was like convinced if I told anyone, I was going to be put in like in an institution. I mean, I was so catastrophizing like the act of like verbalizing what was happening to me, even to like my husband, that I just like hearing someone else say like, yeah, I have this too. And she was probably like the best person kind of unwittingly for me to talk to, because she was like very open. She was like, she had dealt with this, for the greater part of her life, and, didn't have the sort of stigma or shame around talking about it that I did. And that was like, started like these baby steps for me, sort of having conversations with other people. I went through like this whole also cycle of shame around taking medication, because I was diagnosed with depression and didn't, was really like, felt like taking medication was like a form of weakness, and felt like I could like fix it by like exercising more or eating better, or, spending more time out of the office, which is just like, in my particular case, just not appropriate or effective. And so having having conversations with my friends whom I never had conversations with mental health about, and realizing like how many of them, once I opened up to them about it, were open about their own mental health journeys and about like, oh yeah, I also have like depression and I also take this, and was just, it was like suddenly like I realized, I mean, there was a moment of like feeling incredibly foolish that I had like wasted all of this time being so sort of like scared and ashamed of how I was feeling. But also like just this instant sigh of relief, like in my entire life, like feeling like all of a sudden, like, it's okay. Like, it's really like, it's something I can talk about. And I think that was a moment when I really decided to make, mental health really a cornerstone of the sort of culture at Altuzarra, and something that I would be really committed to. And then that's when I heard about Kenneth's amazing project. And literally, I like remember reading about it and being like, I need to find Kenneth Cole's email immediately and try to get involved in this. And yeah, have been very committed to it ever since. And I really do, I think, the call today is obviously about the sort of business case around mental health, and why addressing it is so important, which I think is a really important perspective for leaders in this industry, because I have the lived experience of knowing that once you address it and once you talk about it, you become more creative, you become more engaged, you become more focused. But there is also, I think, as a leader, and maybe I'm just the kind of leader who I care deeply about the people that I work with. I think that there is forming sort of empathetic bonds with your team, especially when you have a smaller team, and letting them know that you're here for them, and that you support them, I think is really important as a human. I think that's sort of what we're here for. And they're people it's people I see every single day. I see them way more than my family. So that's sort of why I think it's important.
Also, if I could jump in there, we're going through this very interesting time right now, and which exacerbates everything. And I refer to it as a crisis of uncertainty. In business, and I guess in life too, we can take any answer. We can take yes and no, but the answer that's hardest to take is that of I don't know. And we're living in a world of absolute uncertainty right now. And it started with COVID. And am I going to work? Am I not going to work? My kids going to school? They're not going to school. Do I wear a mask? Do I get a vaccine? Do I get a booster? Do I get 2 more boosters? Do I get on the subway? And we're still in that nebulous place of uncertainty. And it's at the workplace. It's everywhere else. And now it's compounded with what's happened in Ukraine and school shootings and eco-anxiety and polarized political landscape, and everywhere we turn, and women's reproductive rights. And it's traumatizing, and people are struggling and trying how to process it all. What matters anymore? What is really important at the end of the day? And putting all that together at the end of the day is hard for anybody and everybody, I would argue. So, and I do think that as tough as things are, they are exacerbated, and to the degree you're able to accept the fact that that is the way it is, and that's okay. And access resources, talk about it, express yourself, have open, vulnerable conversations. It just gets a lot easier. And I don't know that there's really another course, another path. And Joseph, I think, articulated it well. But it's a journey we're all on right now, and I don't see that changing anytime soon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think I just want to make a quick comment to say burnout has been a concern since before the pandemic. So we know the World Health Organization defined it and issued that definition of in May of 2019 out of concern that occupational burnout was becoming an epidemic. And we know the connection between stress, burnout, and mental health is real. And so now, as you said, Kenneth, we have all this uncertainty. Human beings do not do great with uncertainty. We like certainty. We don't necessarily have it, and we have lots of stress. So having these mental health conversations as part of our workplace culture is really essential. So I know we've had a few questions come in, so I would like to turn it over to Sasha to field those questions, and thank the panelists for a great conversation, and they'll be available for questions and comments. And it's always helpful for those participating to share what you've done that's been successful so others can learn from you. So I'll turn it over to Sasha.
Thank you. So we do have a question about medication, which may be a difficult topic to discuss on a Zoom call. But if people are curious about different types of medication, who best to talk to about that? Does anyone, I mean, Darcy, Kenneth, Joseph, do you have any?
I mean, I think your doctor probably. That was certainly like my personal experience with like medication was that I think seeking help is really important. But I think you should probably go see a doctor.
Yeah, I mean, I did want to just comment that finding a mental health professional is very, very difficult. We have shortages. We have therapists and psychiatrists who don't accept insurance, and you have to pay out of pocket, and it's expensive. They're still there, and there are still options, and it's really important, as Joseph said. But as Joseph described, starting with your primary care provider, your primary care nurse practitioner or physician, is a really great place to start. You have a relationship often with them, ideally, hopefully. And so they know you well, and that they're a trusted resource for information, and they can help connect you with a mental health professional. Not easy, but it's possible. So it's really important to get care.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you both. I'm going to read the next question. As a model in the fashion industry, I've heard someone earlier in my career once say that being raped and abused is a part of being a model, saying that models are supposed to go through those things to become successful in the fashion industry. I was disgusted and horrified to hear someone say something so sexist, objectifying, misogynistic like that, because abuse in the industry is a very serious topic. It's heartbreaking to see how much topics like this have been downplayed in previous years, especially for models who still are abused and mistreated in their work environments. What would you say to people who downplay mental health in this way, especially in the fashion industry, and how much trauma is involved in situations like abuse and mistreatment in our industry?
I don't know, Joseph, you want to go on that? Look, I don't think abuse and mistreatment is acceptable in any industry, and I think it's a matter of self-respect, and you shouldn't accept it. It's just not acceptable. So you have to find your voice and find your footing, and there are resources for that too. So I would urge everybody. I'd urge everybody to stand up for themselves, because that is often the impetus of a lot of whatever else we're talking about. So.
Mm-hmm.
I also think there is we can try to put this in the email, but I believe there is an alliance of models for, against abusive behavior.
It's called the Model Alliance.
The Model Alliance, yeah. So, I think that because sometimes it's hard to stand up just, on your own, but having a group supporting you could be really, really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
We'd be happy to share that information in our follow-up. Thank you for that. So the next question, what is a good way to start a conversation about your mental health with your employer? How do you know it's safe to have that conversation?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a very good question. I'm not sure that. I think it might vary, but I would maybe do it in the third person and just ask, are there resources, people in the organization? Don't make it personal. See if there's an open receptiveness to want to have the conversation or be available to anybody in the organization, not necessarily make it about yourself up front. And then based upon how that conversation goes, take it to the next step.
Yeah, I agree with that. I just wanted to comment that I agree 100% because not everyone's at the same place in terms of enlightenment around mental health issues. So there is a risk, of course, but what's important is to find those people within the organization that you know are trustworthy on this topic. And maybe you have an HR department or an EAP or someone else that can help you strategize a little bit on how to approach this. If you have a manager or supervisor that you're unsure about, because it can be very scary and you want to make sure that you have an ally or you've already kind of vetted it with another. I think that's really important.
Mhm.
Also, if you have to ask the question, is it safe, perhaps recommending to the HR to join in the NAMI Stigma-Free Workplace so that you can put those safeguards in your company so that it would feel safe.
This comes from our friends at Kate Spade, a point of affirmation, not a question, but the National Council for Mental Wellbeing, Mental Health, First Aid Training has been so helpful for our community at Kate Spade. We have 80 of us trained across our corporate and field teams and can't say enough positive things about the training for workplace mental health conversations. So great. So thank you for submitting that comment. And I'm gonna have time for one more. In my introduction, I mentioned the partnership between Meta and MHC. Maybe Kenneth, could you share a little bit more of what's in store with this partnership?
Well, we're looking now to scale this, and I do believe we can reach everybody. I mean, today the scalability and the ability to intersect needs to resources is unprecedented, and so we have found that there was a lot of learnings that came over the last study. We just did another one with BIPOC communities, and those we're going to have the results of that in the near future, and then we're going to hopefully learn how to scale this and reach that many more people with what we know to be positive, quantifiably predictable, transparent outcomes. And I do think we can have a very significant impact on stigma, which I think is the largest single force that's debilitating force around mental health. I used to say when I was working with HIV that more people, I believe, died of stigma for AIDS than from AIDS itself, and because they would refuse to get tested, knowing that if they were diagnosed positive, they couldn't live in the life they knew with the people they knew. But it's the same here. And so I do think we're going to make a very profound impact. I hope CFDA will continue to, stay with us aligned, and everybody else will also join us, and we can help you, and you can help us help you make the impact, in your world to the degree we're able.
Thank you, Kenneth. Well, there are some incredible comments that are coming in, really positive ones. So I will make sure to share those with our guests today so they see what you all are sharing. But I want to just say thank you to all who joined and those who felt comfortable submitting questions. I want to thank Joseph for being so open and for sharing his experience, Darcy for leading such an important conversation, Pamela for being such an incredible CFD member and member of MHC, and last but certainly not least, Kenneth for leading this so incredibly and navigating it with not only our members, but the industry at large. And everyone who's joined today will be receiving an email with all this follow-up information that we talked about during the hour, but more. So we hope that you'll be able to use it within your own businesses and if you need it personally. And thank you to everyone today.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you so much.